All right, hello again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been starting to go over the textbook AppInventor2, Create Your Own Android Apps by Wolber, Abelson, Spertus, and Looney. We're in the middle of Chapter 1, and in particular, we are talking the HelloPurr app, where we're going to create an app. We've already put the label on our screen, and we've added the button on our screen, which we set up an image for it. Alright, so we've done all that stuff. So we added the button. Let's see, we did all this. Alright, now to add the meow sound, we just did that. So this is what we have in here so far. We've got a button, we've got a label, and we've got a sound component. Alright, now you'll notice that the button here, I'm going to rename this, and I'm going to call this BTN Pet Kitty. You can see how it changes immediately. Alright, I only have one sound component, but we can still change the name anyway. So let's rename it, and we'll call it SND for sound Kitty Meow. Okay, so I now have all of my components renamed. Now there's all sorts of things I can still do. You know, you can see how this is really big. It's bigger on the screen than what it shows in the book. It's not that important. All right. It says now what we want, if we want to, we can go and we can live test this. And we can, but nothing will happen because we really have not yet taken the time to add our code, which we're going to do in a minute. But just to show you this, when I installed AppInventor, what happened is on my computer here, on my C drive, it ended up adding under my program files x86 folder a new folder called AppInventor. Not much in it, but if you want AppInventor to be able to connect with your computer and actually run these apps in the emulator or on a phone, you've got to click the AI starter.exe file, which starts up a DOS batch file basically, which tells you what you're working on. And then you minimize that. You want to keep it up and running. And to actually run this then, I want to go over to here, I want to go into AppInventor, bring this up, and then what I do to run this is I click connect, and I tell it to connect, in my case, through the emulator. All right. As it says, it's starting the emulator, and this may take a minute or two. It can take up to about 5 minutes, or it can be as fast as about 30 seconds. Here's the emulator, and this is supposed to emulate a phone. What's going to happen when the emulator gets totally up and running is the emulator is going to virtually look identical to my screen right here. The blackened area right there is going to look just like this area. All right. Now it says starting the emulator, this might take a minute or two. Normally you start to get messages and I'm not getting any. There we go. And don't think, oh, well, it'll start in 15 seconds. Sometimes it goes and it downloads goes for those 15 seconds. Then it starts up and it says, now I got to do this, and it'll take 10 seconds or whatever. So it's one of those things that you have to be patient with as you're working with it. You can kind of see the action that's happening over here. Okay? What I want to show you, though, is when we get all done, that I will be able to click on the picture of the kitty, but nothing will happen because I have not yet put any code in that associates that sound control with me actually clicking on the cat image. We're going to do that next. And you can see this is going through different transformations, and it's one of the things that you should see when it comes up is, if you remember, I believe we changed the title on this. Now maybe we didn't. It still says screen 1. So if we do change the title, that change will be reflected up here, and if we tell it we don't want it to see the title, then we won't see this up here. So sorry, it's not responding. Well, we'll force a close, and then if that happens, and it does on occasion, you try it first by clicking connect and reset connection. Sometimes that does just that. It'll reset the connection for you. Then you do another connect and emulator. Now again, this can be frustrating because you may go through this several times before it actually starts working the way that you want it or expect it to work. All right? So I'm hoping, at least, that this comes up. If it doesn't, we'll just lumber on, and hopefully it'll come up then a little bit later. You're going to see a bunch of different icons at the bottom. The one that's over here, you'll see there that there it is. Now it's telling us that it's not responding, so I'm going to tell it this time to wait and see if I can get it to come up. Again, it may or may not. The bad thing about doing this is it's pretty much set up so that I can't do anything and now until the emulator comes up. What I wanted to do though was bring the emulator up, show you what it looks like, and verify with you that as of right now, if I do click on it, nothing will happen. One thing to mention here is all this work that I'm doing, all my files, etc., they're all being saved out to the cloud, which means they're all on a server someplace that's on the internet that typically, at least, we don't have to worry about. Hoping it gets a little further this time, and if it still has a problem, I'm just going to lumber on. But the problem is, if the emulator does not show up, I'm not going to be able to run this where you're going to be able to actually see the output. That's what I'm shooting for here. Sorry, I don't like to create videos that have this much dead space in them. Let's see how far we are in here. If for some reason you go through this, and if I have another error here, it looks like I'm going to, all right, it says again it's not responding, I can force the close or I can tell it to wait. Now if I force close, which is what I just did, all right, it says your companion app is out of date. Click OK to start the update. I don't know why it would be saying that because I just did an update the other day. It says you must be created to a companion to update it. Well, I'm not. All right, which means that my companion app, which means that if I want to go and run it on a phone, I don't. I'm just going to leave this the way it is so I can continue on. All right, so now we want to add behaviors to the components. What we want to do is basically this, and you're going to see it in just a minute. But what we want to do is when we click the button, we want the sound to play, and the sound that we want it to play is the cat meowing. So it's really not hard. To actually write my code, I want to come in here and click, I'm in the designer now, but I want to click where it says blocks. And what I want to do is I'm going to click down here in my blocks area under my different blocks and click on our button. And then I'm going to click on this, which puts it here. In English, what this means is when I click the button, which has got my image in it of a kitty, what do I want to have happen? All right, and what I want to have happen is I want it to play a sound. So I click on my sound component, and you'll notice that one of the ones that's in here that says call this .play. All right, and there's other things that are in here too. We're going to look at them in just a minute. All right, so as it says, you've added the button, the label, and the sound components. We went into the blocks editor right now, and I don't know if this is a good analogy or not. Sorry, that was the previous video that I was doing. It says, look at the blocks editor window. This is where you instruct the component what to do and when to do it. You're going to create or direct the kitty button to play a sound when the user taps it. If components are ingredients in a recipe, then blocks are the cooking instructions. So we went to the blocks editor. We came up here. We clicked the one that was button1.click and we dragged it to our workspace. Blocks would have the word when on them, as mentioned here. All right, that have the word when on them. They're referred to as event handlers. AppInventor2 is what's referred to as an event handling language. You can imagine it as the program is sitting there waiting for you to do something, like click a button. When you click a button, you as the user causes an event to happen, and the system will respond to that event if you put instructions in to tell it to respond to it. So we've got this, our button click, and then it says we want to click the sound1 component, and we want to call sound1.play. Okay? And I thought that I'd associated the sound1 component with the file that we wanted it to play. Let's see if we did or not. So I'm going back to the designer. There's sound1. There's our source. So yes, it is. Now this minimum interval in milliseconds, 1,000 seconds means a second. So 500 means half a second. Okay? So let's go back into our blocks editor. Now you may or may not have been able to hear that, even with the microphone turned up. This is kind of looks like a puzzle piece. And when I put this in, you can see that it fits. You can even see that the system lights up to let it's going in, but it'll also click a little bit. Okay? And that showed that those pieces do interlock. In other words, they worked. So, going back to our program, what we did was this. As it says, unlike traditional programming, when you use the event response blocks in AppInventor, it's more English-like. All right? So it says what we want it to do is we want it to purr and meow when you tap the button. We'll simulate the purr by making the device vibrate. It may sound hard, but it's not. So we want to do this. We also want to, we've already called sound1.play. Mine isn't called sound1 because I changed the name of it to SND meow or whatever it was. SND kitty meow. If I go back to my sound component, I can now tell it we also want it to vibrate. Notice that we latch that in, and again we get the clicking sound. Now there's more to it, so our program is not complete right now. Because when we vibrate, we have to tell it how often we want it to vibrate with the milliseconds thing that's in there. So we just did this. It says you might have noticed that the call sound1.vibrate includes the text milliseconds. All right? It says to make the device vibrate for half a second, you need to enter the number 500. Now I want to show you two different ways of doing this. Both of them work just fine. I can either click here where it says math, drag out a 0, and put it right there and type the 500 in there, which is fine. Okay, I can do that. Or I can literally click in a blank spot in my viewer, type in the number 500, and then click on it, which does the same thing. That already has the pre-put in value for me. All right? So we've now got that done. We've told it to play for 500 milliseconds or every half second. Shaking the device. It says, let's add a final element that taps into another cool feature of Android. making the kitty meow when you shake the device. It says to do this, we'll use a component called the accelerometer. We're at 15 minutes, so I'll come back and finish this up in just a couple minutes.